And then we even rolled into the airport at the end, wrapped our bikes up in coconut coir and bath mats and sent them back to Australia like that instead of a box. It was really a fantastic trip. And then the next year we went back again. I went back with Noel and my dad and 2 girlfriends. And that was just sort of a personal trip. But like I said, that was when I realized India's the place. There's this space. You don't see any cycle tourists there. And there might be parts of India where people are cycle touring on grasshoppers tours and Intrepid and things, but like we just sort of choose routes less traveled. I don't know how. We just go. There's so many roads. I mean, if you could cycle India for the rest of your life and ride a new road every day because they're always being built or they don't even exist on Maps Me, you know you're riding on blank space.
Welcome to the Seek Travel Ride podcast, where we share the stories and experiences of people who have undertaken amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on 2 wheels with our listeners.
Hello, I'm your host Bella Malloy, and I'm very excited to introduce my guest for today's episode of Seek Travel Ride, Jess Thomas. If you were to reflect back on Jess's adventures, you'd quickly see that travel and exploring new places are at the very heart of her experiences. She's visited over 70 countries, exploring half of these on 2 wheels. In fact, when she isn't out exploring new places, she's actually working as a travel guide for other people as they take their own journeys. Today, I'm speaking with her while she's partway through a trip celebrating 10 years of bike travel. And what better way to do so than with a bike adventure? She's made her way across Central Asia, through Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, traversing the Pamir highway along the Bartong Valley, before heading into Europe. Currently, Jess is in Vienna, with an end destination of the Shetland Isles. Something that's clear to me is how in tune Jess is with what I would call lessons from the road. Listening to the insights that come her way as she opens herself up to these travel experiences. Each one informing the next adventure, study or work decision, and always taken with a good dose of humour, openness and enthusiasm. Indeed, it was a bike journey through India which proved to be the most transformative to Jess, and I'm certainly looking forward to delving into the details of that trip as well as all the others which have shaped her into the world adventurer she is today. Jess, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Bella. That was a very warm welcome.
I'm looking so forward to digging into your stories, Jess. But a question which I start my show with, and I ask it of all my guests, is, Jess, do you remember the very first bike you ever rode?
I do, and I was toying up whether to mention my very first bike that I rode around on the veranda many times and fell off. But the one that comes to mind as a proper first bike, I bought it when I was 16 years old, and it was a women's specialised hybrid for $650 from Bateman's Bay Cycle Shop with all my hard-earned money from working at a sports shop.
Oh, good old Bateman's Bay. Listeners, as you can tell from Jess's accent, she is a fellow Aussie, and I know Bateman's Bay pretty well too because that area of the Australian East Coast is where, Jess, I would spend a lot of my summertime if I'm going to the coast, and I know you grew up around there as well, didn't you?
I did. We moved from the North Coast, sort of Taree, Wingham area, when I was about 11 or 12 years old and came to the South Coast to be close to my grandparents. And yeah, we switched the farm life for the beach life on the South Coast, and I couldn't be more grateful for that.
Wow, farm life for the beach life. Have you actually ever lived for years and years in a major city?
Good question. I sort of connected with Sydney in a pretty big way for about 2 years there because of going to university. But I dipped in and out even of that, sort of going off to Madrid for a year, living there on exchange, and then did spend a year and a half almost, I think, in Canberra, where you live occasionally.
Canberra is my Aussie home. I love Canberra. In Australia, we call it the bush capital. The bush is what we call our forests and stuff, everybody that's listening that's not from Australia, that's not aware of that. And it's because Canberra is full of green spaces. It's sort of got everything that you need from a city without feeling like you're ever in a city.
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. And it's also really bike friendly. I found it was where I was living anyway, really helpful. And it's enjoyable hanging out on the lakes, and it feels like every suburb is so organised. It's different to every other city in Australia, isn't it?
It's massively different. When I went there recently, though, it's also rapidly changing, like everywhere in the world. A lot of population growth and changes as well. But I always love Canberra's got a lot of green spaces, and it is an awesome place to explore on a bike. There's lots of cycling infrastructure and stuff there as well. When I think about the stories we're going to come up with you, Jess, something that was pretty clear when I was trawling through your back history, your back catalogue of adventures, is it feels almost like you've been adventuring from day dot, and that you obviously come from a family that embraces adventures as well. The word adventure rolls off the tongue really easily, especially to someone who's partaken in them for so long. But what does the word adventure really mean to you?
Yeah, that's a really beautiful question, Bella, and it's definitely worth pondering. Something that comes up so much when I think of adventure is just to be a chameleon and to have diversity. I really prioritize diversity in life. I think it might be my passion. Adventure to me is to be a chameleon of change. Like you can just move through a landscape wearing many masks, sort of like dipping in and out. So I was thinking in this 36-hour period whilst I'm here in Vienna, we arrived last night and went to the most famous big beer hall in Austria, followed by camping next to the Danube River with all other cyclists from the Eurovelo 6. And then we woke up this morning and came in and we were sort of like tourists looking through the churches. And in the afternoon, we had supermarket lunch in a square, followed by a concert tonight. And then we'll sleep on the floor of a warm showers host. And so it's just the huge privilege and opportunity to be able to move through like a set of experiences without attaching too much to any of them, and just, flexibility, but it's a privilege.
It's funny, like you're in Vienna for 36 hours and yet each one of your experiences are so vastly different, yet similar to what different types of travellers would be taking. You know, you're talking about a supermarket lunch, like a pavement picnic or something like that, to checking out all the churches, to sleeping in a warm showers host or camping. It's so different. And if I think about you there on the Eurovelo 6, you'd be constantly seeing different riders from different countries through the day as you're making your way along there as well.
Absolutely. And I think that we are seeing so many, families with dogs and 3-year-olds on bikes. You know how they get that little kind of attachment that locks onto the back of the bike and they're pulling their 3-year-old on the back, which is incredible. That's a common sight. And then you see people who are into their 80s, I would say, which is just so inspiring. And then we're seeing the road cyclist classics. And I think because we're seeing so many people now in this section of the Eurovelo 6, sort of from Budapest through to Vienna and beyond, we've just ridden another few hundred Ks past through to Linz. That adventure within me is really sparked because it's like everyone just does adventure so differently. Like it might be a huge adventure for some people to go out with their families for a long weekend. Like I cannot even imagine the effort and the planning and the sense of challenge and then satisfaction followed. And then our adventure is so long. I mean, like you said, I've been traveling since sort of day dot in a way. And so adventure is sort of like a lifestyle. But then within that lifestyle of adventure, there's like these kind of really intense periods. And if you can design it well, you follow that with something a little bit more decompressing, which helps you move into the next like hardcore period of, I don't know, maybe not showering for a couple of weeks whilst out, whether it's hiking or cycling or,
I imagine also you must be able to reflect back now, Jess, and think back on so many of those type of pinch me moments, just moments of awe where you're in a place and it could be a busy city or it could just be the Bartang Valley or it could be somewhere massive mountains or gushing rivers and just be going, pinch me, am I here? Do you do that?
For sure, absolutely. And when you said that, I was just closing my eyes and thinking what came to mind. I remember cycling in Cyprus and I didn't really understand the history of North and South, so Cyprus and North Cyprus. There's so much UN presence. Apparently it's one of the places the UN has been longest kind of standing in Cyprus. And I was just on a mountain, kind of just had crossed over from North to Cyprus. And there's so much history in the land that we get to cycle and that we didn't realize. And you can kind of feel it. Intense, like happenings that have gone down in that place, even if it's just a really good view. Sometimes, it's so much more than that. And I just sort of sat down and I cried because crying comes to me like quite a lot, which is fine.
Does that happen often? Like, do you find you're overwhelmed with emotion during these type of moments?
I think it did a lot in my early 20s when I really got into nature and going into mountains and seeing spectacular places that took my breath away. And it's happening maybe a little less now that maybe because I've had so many beautiful nature experiences and it's maybe not the first time. But what I get more of a kick out of now is spending time with other people who are on their first version of seeing that. And I'm like, yes, I can feel I'm reliving my experience through their experience. And that's probably how I get my current high in life.
Oh my gosh, that so resonates with me. People listening to the show, a little known fact about Bella that you may not know is, in addition to doing the podcast, something else I do at Seek Travel Ride is I help arrange people's holidays in France, cycling holidays in France. And I cannot tell you how much of a kick I get out of when I put something together and then people arrive in country and then they're messaging me, telling me about their experiences. I almost feel more excited for them than they are. And I mean, they're excited, obviously. But yeah, no, I totally get that, Jess. It's sort of like you know what they've got to look forward to. And so you've got excitement in yourself for that.
Yeah, like currently 2 girls who I had cycling in India with me just in December didn't know each other, came on the trip. I organised trips in India. Now they've just done a cycling tour in Lombok together and brought another person along. So it's like this rolling ball effect, and you have no idea what it might look like when you connect with someone and do a cycle tour together. But often it doesn't stop there, and they go on and affect other people and have a really beautiful story of their own. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I love the web of connections, and it sounds like you do too.
Totally. And it's sort of like passing the baton of experiences on, opening people's mindsets to what it's like, what the world's like. What's interesting about you, Jess, is you've taken so many adventures, but leaving school as a 17-year-old, you actually enlisted in the army in Australia. And so I sort of think of it as total opposite to the travelling lifestyle and travelling way of life and the way that you fund your life now. It's so vastly different in my mind to what the discipline of being an army recruit would have been like, and army's basic training and all of those sort of things being drilled into you, breaking you down to build you back up again. Do you ever reflect back on that and wonder, was that a catalyst for taking the lifestyle you've taken on now?
Absolutely. More in recent years, reflecting back, because it's been more than a decade. I joined when I was 17 years old. It's pretty young. But they didn't really need to break me down at all, Bella, because I was such a perfect little robot sponge. I didn't question any rules. I didn't do anything that, I literally wouldn't walk on the grass. I'd walk on the pavement and call everyone sir and ma'am. And I was so willing to follow, like, how you jump, how high. Even though I was a soldier for a year and then changed into being an officer in training. And when you're an officer, you don't just follow, you have to lead. And I definitely had that within me. And that's why they place you where they want you. But then something changed in my psychology. I went hiking in Nepal and I sort of put it down to that. Hiking in the Everest region, getting lost for like an hour. They went out looking for me. I was just going to the toilet. Every good story of mine starts with going to the toilet. And yeah, in that moment of being lost, I thought, wow, I could just disappear right now. The mountains are so big. I'd never been to the Himalayas. It was so overwhelming, so spectacular. And I almost went AWOL. I almost didn't get on the plane to go home at all. And that was after having been in the army for about 2 years at that point. But I did get back on the plane. It took another 6 months to get out. And then I remember being in this room when they have conversations about the future of your life, what you're doing, with the big commanding officers, and they all joked and said, maybe you'll go to Nepal and work with the yaks. And I was like laughing with them thinking, I might do that actually. What a good idea. I really do love Nepal. And I have since then worked in Nepal. So I guess the huge swing happened for me where the military was so regimented and controlled, and I didn't question it. And then once I did, I swung literally to the other side. I am polar opposite to what I was. I wasn't necessarily a military kid. I just didn't know what I was. And I respect all my friends, by the way, who are still in the military and enjoy that and have that mindset. But yeah, everyone's psychology is just so different. And it did impact me in a big way on reflection, a huge way. I'm a nonconformist at this point in my life.
It's funny, it's only through really being away from Australia when I go back there, I realise just how many rules we're surrounded by back in Australia.
You're so right. The rest of the world is so onto it at this point, that Australia and New Zealand, we have to wear helmets, we get fined if we don't. Our COVID experience was so different.
Oh my gosh, like if you don't have a bell on your bike, you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
Being away from it, you realise there's so many rules that we grow up with that we just are used to.
It's very true. We've actually been having that conversation about Australia being quite a nanny state a lot on this trip, mainly because we're different generations.
Because when you talk about different generations, you're currently travelling, is there 4 or 5 of you? There's 4 women and your dad?
Until tomorrow, we're 4, my dad and 2 girlfriends. And then we actually, 2 of them leave tomorrow and we swap one. We swap out for another girlfriend who's flying into Copenhagen. We'll meet her tomorrow night.
I'm thinking, Jess, this isn't the first time you've travelled with your dad.
It's not. We did a cycling tour through India about 6 years ago. And that was quite inspirational for me. It inspired me to take more people to India, watching my dad. So before that, he had not cycle toured. He bought a Vivente, a touring bike, because I had one. He was riding it down to the pool. So sort of 10 kilometers max each cycle trip that he did in Maria. And then when we went to India, I think we rode sort of 100 Ks a day for 30 days or something like that. And my dad was like one of those dogs, the little dogs that you put on the front of your car and you like the heads wobble around.
The naughty dogs.
Yeah, that. Like that with everything that he saw every day. His head was just like swiveling. He's like, look at the colors, look at the sounds, look at oh my God, did you see that elephant? And I was like, this is crazy what I'm witnessing. This man in his 60s, well, late 50s at that point, having such an incredible experience. He's blown away. He's so present. And then I thought, I've got to bring more people and do this more.
It's what we were talking about earlier, that giving that gift of excitement about an adventure to other people and passing it on, isn't it?
Yeah, and that sort of just develops through India. That develops because it's so amazing and it's exactly what is called for. But that was our first trip together and we haven't done another cycling trip since then. But Dad said, please, we have to do another at some point. And I always thought, oh, what would suit Dad? You know, we should do maybe Laos. He's keen to go there at some point. I've already cycle toured there, so it's always nice to go somewhere new together. Or the Carretera Austral, maybe in Patagonia, would be amazing. But then we decided to do the Pamir Highway, which we just did that for the first month of this current adventure a month ago.
I read somewhere that you'd broken down the section through the stands and the Pamir Highway into like 4 zones or 4 sections. I think the first one was at the bread zone.
Yeah, it sure was. And we didn't know it would be the bread zone because, well, when we started cycling out of Dushanbe on the M41 northern route, we just got given so much bread. Like on the first day, we not only got given bread, but chocolate cake, raw meat, like just a bag of raw meat to take along, invited in for lots of food. It was just a wild experience. But anyway, on the first 3 or 4 days of the northern route, we were given like maybe 30 loaves of bread. So we just sort of thought it would be normal. And then once that section finished and we got back to the Pamir Highway, no more bread.
Oh, what did it give way to? I'm trying to remember what the other zones are. I think zone 3 was the dusty zone, but I can't remember what the other 2 were. What were the other 2?
Actually, so I'm also just remembering, but I think the second zone was the dust route from Kalakum through to Rushon. So that's because the Chinese are doing lots of roadworks in Central Asia to Belt and Road Initiative, which is really interesting. And, you know, it has its positives and its negatives. But for us, it meant lots of dust. And we were riding next to big trucks. And once they go past you, you can't even see each other. So much dust. And I didn't mind it. It was definitely the theme of the route. And then the third one was
the Bartang Valley and then Kyrgyzstan.
Exactly.
It's funny, Jess. I wanted to explore these later in the pod, but it's just naturally come up now. A trip like that with your dad as well. When you reflect back on what you've done on those 4 sections, which one gives you the most excitement for adventures that you've experienced?
Hands down, the Bartang Valley. It was so incredible. We cycled up. It sort of takes a few days to reach the base and then you climb up the high plateau and then you're on the plateau for 100 kilometers before you get back to the Pamir Highway, which is so remote. It's ridiculous. It's like Gibber Plains and it's ethereal. Like everything around you truly could be just another planet. And there's no one up there at all. We actually had to leave one of our friends behind because she got sick. And if she had have continued with us, we wouldn't have been able to get her out. There was no body going past. But the view was just unreal. Like I had tears again coming out of the Bartang Valley to get back onto the Pamir because I was really blown away with awe with the location we were in. But I was also just like, it was this release that we'd been able to do it because everyone said it's so challenging. People I respect hugely were like, wow, I made it through the Bartang. What a big accomplishment. And I'm like, I just did the Bartang Valley on my touring bike and everything went well and we're all so happy as a team. Yeah, the Bartang. But every single section was really special for its own reasons as well.
Do you ever find that when you travel these sort of places that you know a little bit about them, and so your perception v the reality of when you're there, it'd be interesting to see how much they meet your expectations as opposed to maybe exceed them, or conversely, if you go to places expecting something huge and then go, oh, is that it? To give you a case in point, this is such an Australian case in point. I still remember the first time I saw the big banana in Coffs Harbour and go, what? That's the big banana? And look, it is big compared to a banana, but it's not what I was expecting.
Yeah, that's absolutely classic, Bella, for sure. And, maybe that's sort of happening at this point in our trip now because we went and did the Pamir Highway and then we came to Europe and we're cycling along the Danube and it's really flat and chill and doesn't have big mountains. And so it's that kind of, you've put yourself in like the ultimate part of the world for nature and adventure and hardcore, and like you're out there by yourself, and then you throw yourself in the mix with like kids and dogs and and like amazing geriatrics.
How has it been then to turn the adventure down a dial or two and be on a flat river path? Because that would do my head in, I have to be honest with you, Jess. Flat paths and Bella do not mix.
So it's done Dad's head in a little bit, and definitely been more challenging for him to, he doesn't keep quiet about these things. He says, Jess, this is not as spectacular as the Pamir Highway, just letting you know. And I'm like, oh God, how do I manage everyone's expectations? But you can't. But for me, I think I'm always out traveling, which is, it's important not to always be doing the biggest and the bestest thing. So this has been nice for reflection time and seeing the cities of Europe. I kind of think of these Eurovelos. I did the Eurovelo 8 along the Mediterranean a long time ago, and that was completely different. But it's kind of like you're just transporting yourselves to the ridiculously beautiful cities of Europe, right, by bike. And then when you get there, you have a bike to, like, we're riding around Vienna today, and no one else is really, tourists aren't really on bikes here, and it's the best way to get around the city. We are so lucky. And even if the section between Budapest and Linz is spectacular, but before that we rode from Romania through to Belgrade, and yeah, that was really challenging. And sometimes you're riding up on river dikes that were hot and not beautiful, and you're riding through industrial sections. But whatever, at least you get to the cities of Europe. Like, how else would you get there? And yeah, really, you really get to have some highs and some lows. And I think it's a big part of maturing as an adult. For me, out on the road, I can handle the things that aren't the best all the time. I have to ride through a bit of everything.
There's an element of what you see in between on a bike too, though. And I'm talking as I'm thinking here clearly, but what I love about bike travel is just that I experience everything in between. And sometimes, yeah, you are on a route that's taking in the not so nice places and the outskirts of a place to get to somewhere else. But then also it's the other things that you wouldn't notice if you were in a car or on a train.
Yeah. And then maybe it's picking those connections with people along the route that you have that you never would have met them otherwise if you were, like you say, doing formal travel, or have a guidebook and looking to tick off the cities of Europe or whatever it is, certain buildings. And yeah, it's a lot more organic, and it's really in mindset, isn't it? The way that you think about the experience. I mean, lots of cycle tourists that you talk to are riding such big distances that a lot of their trips would be, they have to find the little sparkles in the trips, don't they?
Yeah, and it is one of those things, because even doing this show, invariably we're talking about people's experiences, and it's just the way our minds work. We're always thinking about the most positive, or sometimes the most hardest, or the thing that took the most effort to grit through, as opposed to really what the realities of a day-to-day would actually be. And the day-to-day might be that, I had tailwinds today, it was sunny and it was flat, and I didn't actually do much other than go from this place that no one's heard about to this place that no one's heard about.
Absolutely.
Not everywhere is going to be full of amazement, but a lot of it is. And I want to take you back actually then to your first big cycle tour. It may not have been your first experience of travelling on a bike, but it was certainly your first huge distance, and that would have been then on the Eurovelo 8, Athens to Barcelona. What spurred that on?
So what spurred that on was I had that bike that I'd bought when I was 16 years old. And then I joined the army. So I had like a slightly disposable income at the time when I was 18. So I bought Pamirs because I thought it would be cool to cycle the Great Ocean Road. And then the bike and the Pamirs sat there for a couple of years not being used. And then I had the opportunity to go on exchange in Spain. And so I found a cheap ticket to get to Europe, and it was into Athens. And I was walking along with my parents, and I was toying with ideas like I could volunteer in Europe between getting from Greece to Spain, or I could do like a Croatia sail or something. I was about 21 at the time. So I'd already traveled around the world, but never by bike. And then I said, but I've got my bike, so maybe I could do an adventure where I just like ride my bike from Athens to Barcelona and then catch the train to Spain, to Madrid. And my dad was like, yeah, that's a great idea. You can do that. And we looked up we got enough internet just to check the Google Maps distance, and it was about 4,000 kilometers. And my mum was in the background as usual, like listening to my dad, and I brought up crazy ideas. And then I did it. I printed off a Google map of Greece, and I knew I just had to keep the ocean to my left. And I flew in with that Specialized bike, and it buckled 4 times on the trip. The back wheel, it was not set up for it. And a friend, Marie, even flew in and joined me in Corfu, which was great because then we caught the ferry across to Albania together and cycled Albania, Montenegro, Croatia together. Yeah, so it was a 44-day trip, and we cycled 3,500 kilometers or something like that. And then I had my bike for the year, which was amazing because I had a bike in Europe whilst living over there. I got a tattoo of a bike on my ribs because I was so into it. I never wanted to forget the trip. And I didn't know that it would lead to so many more journeys by bike. I just thought it was this really empowering thing that you could do. I mean, I was calling my parents, guys, did you know if you rode 80 kilometers every day, you could ride around the whole world in less than a year? Sort of the Americas distance, sort of.
It's funny the sort of things that you think about day to day when you're riding as well. You know, when we were just talking about how it's not always big vistas and sometimes there's just monotony of getting from point A to point B. What it does leave you is with a lot of thinking time, which can be good or bad sometimes, but you get to solve your own problems, you get to forget about problems, you get to think about, oh, I wonder, how long would it take me if I was to do this every day? How far could I get in blah? You must have also learnt so much about all the places in between Athens to Barcelona that didn't exist in your mind before you set off on that trip, that you had no comprehension about existing beforehand. Take away the big cities that many of us know about, all the in-between places. Like, you can look at a map now and forever go, oh yeah, I remember being through here and here and here. And the reason I say that, Jess, is because, you know, if we fast forward through the years of your life and you've made travel part of your life, you've made it the way that you earn money as well, you're a travel guide. I think you took a trip through the South Island of New Zealand on a bike. Shortly afterwards, you were guiding people there, and it was because of your bike experience and bike travel experience that you were able to impart so many extra insights to that group of people as well.
Definitely. And you feel so connected to the space. Like with that South Island, New Zealand trip, yeah, I rode alone from Nelson with the help of friends leaving some stuff at their house. As usual, you need a little support along the way. And just did the full loop of the South Island on the Highway 1, camped and stuff. And then jumped in a van and took a group of American 18-year-olds on that same route. And I remembered every single turn. And I remembered the, people along the way who'd helped me, where their houses were. And it's just amazing. It's like a map in your mind of all the things that you've done that just doesn't quite come with other forms of travel. Hiking, I just quite can't, because I'm a hiking guide, but I can't quite remember every turn on a hike. Maybe it's just the speed that you travel at, but there's something about being on a bike, and it's amazing. You remember the lay of the land, how it felt, the hills, the downs. Pretty cool. And you're right, it does, I guess, set you up with this. Like, I'm not from New Zealand. I'm not from some of the countries that I've guided in or the places that I've guided in. But I think that cycling there has definitely made me feel more connected to the place and the people.
There's just something different about arriving to places on 2 wheels. It's funny when you're talking about remembering every twist and turn of the road. I'm definitely one of those people, if I'm in a car, I joke with my husband, I just arrive places. But on a bike tour, I remember every part of the road. And I can be there years later and have memories of, I'm fairly sure if I was to go here, this would be there. It's funny how that works, isn't it?
There's so much in our minds. It's amazing. But do you think that when you're solo touring, you remember things a lot more because it's your responsibility compared to being in a group?
Yeah, totally. And to be fair, if I'm the person driving the car or if I was the one taking the group, I would definitely probably feel more responsibility to have to switch on and take more notice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I naturally kind of take that role these days just because of having the trips that I run in India, for example. Whenever I'm on any cycle tour these days, I've got my quad lock, and it's really good because you're just dealing with new places every day. You've never heard of them, but because you're looking at them so regularly on a map, it's almost like you just know the place that you're in. So much more relevant than when you're in a car and you're driving big distances, and I don't think your mind can quite keep up. When you're on the bike, you really need to like position yourself, see which side of the river you want to be on or whatever, and learn why you would go to that little town or that little town and which is the best route between. It's interesting. I love knowing places. It's such a, like, geography really is important, which is funny because as a young person, I wasn't very good at geography. I wasn't very good at positioning, and now it's essential and it's fun.
You remember at the very start of the show you were talking about adventure, and adventure for you is like a chameleon. It changes colours and stuff. Like the other thing I think, a chameleon's obviously an animal, and I was thinking that's the other thing that you notice when you're on a bike is wildlife, because you're hearing the wildlife and seeing it and stuff like that as well. I'm sure that resonates too.
Yeah, I think something that I would aspire to in the future is being a little bit more brave about wildlife, actually, because I love people and the different sort of people we see around the world. But it is strange to get used to a new place and not knowing what sort of wildlife is out there. Not to the point that sort of some people are scared of spiders and snakes in Australia, but just being comfortable camping at night. That would be really fantastic, to just feel completely at one with nature. And like, I think I'm pretty into nature. It would be great to kind of get to that next level of, do you know what I mean? Like even in the Pyrenees, if you go camping, do you feel completely calm?
It's funny. I've mentioned this on a few recent episodes. I went camping with a friend who lives just in the further village along, and both of us are sort of trying to get our own, I don't think it's bravery leagues. I think both of us are trying to get more experience of just camping solo in the tents. Mm. We camped up high in the mountains, and then we had a herd of cows descend on our tent area, which was all cool until they started sort of really invading and they started licking the tents, and then we sort of hid away, and then we were worried we were going to get trampled in the night. And so there's a certain different element of all of that, but I love just being out and hearing the bells and just hearing the whistle of a red kite, or seeing literally tens and 50 odd massive griffon vultures circling and thermaling in the air or something. Like, it is amazing what you just feel part of. And there is an element where you feel more connected to it. I think I feel about the size of an ant so many times when I'm out in these landscapes as well.
Yeah, it's humbling, that's for sure. Oh, it makes me think of like Northern Australia, where we, you camp in the dry grass of the Northern Territory, say Kakadu or something, and like a cane toad sounds like a water buffalo, even though it's so tiny.
Yeah, there's also moments though where I think there is not a way in the world that I would ever do what I'm doing here back in Australia, like walking through thick, long grass in the middle of summer. I can do it here, but back home it's like you're never more than a few metres away from a massive snake. And I'm not saying that you see snakes all the time in Australia, people. I'm just saying that in the middle of summer on a hot day, you just wouldn't go walking through long grass in general, would you?
It's been instilled since a young age. We just need to think about it. And it's just a subconscious way of moving, and yeah, but you don't make silly decisions, like even going alone. There's lots more to think about in Australia, because if you did get bitten, you'd need some support. You wouldn't have it.
Yeah, well, there's certain things you take with you. I used to ride with like a snake puncture, like a bandage, like a compression bandage. So if you got bit by a snake, you knew how to deal with that. And this is more an insight into my anxious self, people. And again, I'm not saying you'll ride in Australia and you're going to get bitten by a snake, but certainly where I used to ride a lot in the snowy mountains, especially mountain biking, in certain times of the year, you're almost guaranteed to see snakes on the trails. And you learn to deal with that. But I remember thinking, if I didn't have my bandage, sometimes I think, I've got my spare tube. I can always use that if I needed to. Like, there's just a different element of things that you just become accustomed to. That's interesting. I want to move away from the rabbit warren of Australian wildlife, though. Mm-hmm. And I want to dig into then what it was like transitioning to becoming a tour guide. So what's it like to take adventures and then stop, and then it's not your adventure that you're taking, you're sort of guiding someone else's adventure?
Yeah, that's such a good question to reflect on. One thing that did happen is I stopped writing as much. So I used to keep a blog and write a lot because, like I said, young Jess was so inspired and huge emotions, and that came out through writing. And then when I started to guide other young people, I suppose it was their turn to write. I started when I was about 24 years old, and now I'm 32. And so It started off with taking, like I said, sort of gap year students, and the aim of that company was to inspire global citizenship. Really beautiful concept, and we would just go traveling around the world. So Australia, New Zealand, Nepal, Tibet, and take young people on these epic adventures. But because you have done them once before, or because you're working in the role, it's definitely a different feeling. Of course, you're at work. Like you're supposed to be there supporting other people's development. And then it moved into hiking guiding and taking guests, sort of like typically 50s and 60s-year-old Australian, really beautiful retired couples who are still curious about life and just getting out there on group tours with world expeditions. And on Lord Howe Island, I used to work as a guide for the Seven Peaks tour. I don't know if you're familiar with Lord Howe, but that was the dream.
Oh, I'm familiar with Lord Howe. I'm not familiar with like a Seven Peaks tour. Are there 7 little peaks on Lord Howe Island, or is this...
There's 7 peaks, and I worked for a lodge called Pine Trees, and I was their guide for a couple of years. That was really beautiful because they asked me to just show these people who came to Lord Howe for 1 week. I got given like maybe 12 people, and to show them a really beautiful time. I got to bring in lots of stories. I would go around to the sort of museum and ask lots of questions and learn stories from some of the locals and bring locals into the picture and get them to sort of bring like more light and colour to the history of Lord Howe, and some naturalists as well. And so that was really fun because I felt I was able to add my own spin to the tours. And so then it really felt like taking ownership, like you were really part of it. And the travel, even though I did the same, I was living on the same island for a couple of years, every week felt like an adventure, like a different trip. And the people that came on it were always different. I love people. And so actually being in the same place is not really an issue at all, as long as you get like new influx of interesting, people. But your question is really a good one, because you don't want to, like a chef sometimes goes home and cooks himself toast, right? You don't want to really exhaust yourself of the thing you love. But that's why I became a hiking guide and not a cycling guide.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I did start a company taking people cycle touring in India, but it's only like 2 trips, December, January. And then I go back to other types of guiding, hiking guiding.
That's a good twist on it, because you're still traveling and doing something that you're passionate about, but what you really love, you're sort of still keeping for yourself in a way.
Definitely. And working with different aged people and different demographics is really good, because you get energy from some take your energy, which is fine. And then you go and give it back to yourself through something like cycle touring. Yeah. So it's a lot of finding balance, because all these people who are guides that I've met in my life, different types of guides, they burn out mostly from people, which is interesting because they often love the place and that's why they're living there. I take my hat off to guides that live in one place for a long time. It's just incredible. That will never be me. You've just got to manage your energy and make sure you don't do anything too much.
Was that a conscious decision from the start for you, or is that something that you learnt to have to do?
I suppose in my 20s I had pretty boundless energy and I didn't really need to contemplate that. But now I've learnt that I can spend about 3 months doing anything, 3 months in any job, and then I'm quite excited to move on to another place or job. It doesn't have to be a different company, just a different location, national park, or even right now I'm on this cycle trip for 3 months and I'll probably switch to hiking after that. So it's just switching format of whatever you're doing in life.
You're taking your own trips and then you're going back to work, doing something that gives you energy in a different way, which I'm guessing then is also giving you the funds to be able to go away to take your own trips.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm never doing anything that's, how do you say it? I'm always making relatively sensible decisions, but it is the thing that I'm so intrigued about that people do, how people balance their work and travel, and why people don't travel more, because we're from Bella, you and I are from a country where we know you can work for, say, half the year, and if you wanted to, you could travel half the year. And I know so many people out there who would love to do long-distance cycle touring, and maybe the issue is funds, but I'm so perplexed about the way people choose to spend their time. It's like one of the most interesting things. But I don't know. I obviously do a lot of time on the road, so I'm like not the normal stereotypical.
But I guess it's just what people prioritise in life and have different decisions. I've certainly had listeners reach out after listening to an interview with someone who spent 2 years on the road, and their questions will be, I don't know how they can afford to do that or what. And I guess it all comes down to decisions and choices. There's people who save up a lot of money to be able to fund it. There's people who make decisions on how little they will spend each day to be able to be on the road for so long. There are people who remote work. Claire Wyatt. Hi, Claire. She's somewhere in, I want to say Mongolia. And she worked remotely during her huge monumental tour through Australia and also through Southeast Asia. So it's different decisions. I guess there's also different circumstances though, isn't there, Jess? Like, there's also family commitments as well, which it's all decisions ultimately, isn't it? It's what we decide to do in life. Not one person is making the right or wrong decision. It's just we're all different.
That's right. And I think that traveling around the world and constantly being exposed to different people's way of life and not really connecting to one community or one place or just, I just guess there's limitless ways to do everything.
You were talking about how you found the great balance to be 3 months at a time. If, say, funds were not an issue, so that wasn't an issue, do you think you could be full-time on the road?
I think that each decade I would be a different person. So maybe in my 40s, I might want to spend a year at a time rather than 3 months, right? I think that will change. But right now, that's what I do.
Yeah, I guess the difference is it's sort of, when you were talking about connecting with different people in different countries, there's certainly been long-time travellers who talk about this concept of not feeling a sense of a place is home, not having a grounding somewhere and a community somewhere.
Absolutely.
And that's what I mean. Like, would you miss that?
Yeah, I don't have that, and I haven't had that before, really. Probably not for about 12 years. Yeah, so, but it's the conversation that we all have. Whenever I'm with travellers, we talk about what is community, how do we find our sense of connection. But now I'm meeting so many travellers in this fast-changing world that feel the same, and so we create our own little communities that are not traditional, and I think that it's really happening. I mean, on this trip in a couple of months, like I'm seeing all of my best friends. They've all come in and knitted into this trip. Or I saw one for her wedding in April. I just feel so privileged that this community of people that I really respect and love so much, but they're from all around the world. So there's no place I could just spend and hang out with them anyway. They've all joined me on this trip and I get to bring community on the road. And then we have conversations about what community looks like to us for people who are traveling a lot. And a lot of people say things like buying property that's shared and having a bit of a commune maybe. I mean, I really loosely use that word because I know it's a loaded word. But having maybe a shared space because maybe in the future we possibly don't have children, but we have dogs that we love, but we don't necessarily want to be in the place all the time. Yeah, I think all of these things sound a bit visionary, but everything has just changed so fast with the world and the way that people are working from their computers wherever they want. I hope to live near some of my best mates at some point in my life and somehow make that work, and I'm sure I will. But to answer your question, I guess I would love a community, but I also think there is no community that is going to stay. So it's flux and change as well, right? Like during COVID, I had a few months with an incredible group of people who just so happened to all be stuck on the south coast of New South Wales at that time. And it's not there anymore because we all moved on, which is fine. That's what happens. These days, I think about yoga a lot. Like yoga's been a pretty big part of my life, and non-attachment to people and things is a huge part of yoga philosophy. And I think we need to learn how to, not we. I often use the word we when I mean that's what I'm currently learning in this period of my life, is how to have a healthy non-attachment, not like detachment from everything to the point where you'll spiral or something like that, but more just feeling supported. Maybe I hold my family in my heart whenever I'm on the road, and I do, and feeling that you can connect with your friends and family somehow.
Yeah, I guess, we're at a point in time in the world where we're the most connected we could ever be. In fact, a lot of people take time away to purposefully disconnect. On that topic then, you come across as someone who's really open to what they're feeling, their emotions, taking the insights from the road, all that type of stuff. What about times when you're feeling an emotion that you're not super content with? Like, I imagine it's not all rainbows and sunshine. There would be times where it's grey and loneliness that you're feeling. How are you dealing with those sort of things?
I guess that in times when it does feel challenging, I try to sit with the situation that I'm in, not just escape. And that looks like writing about it. That helps a lot, and it always has. sort of just reframing whatever it is the situation is and trying to like get a little more perspective about the way you look at something. Because, I mean, society teaches us a certain way to look at things, and maybe it's good to, for example, relationships. Like, it's really hard to have a relationship whilst I'm out on the road. And the societal way of thinking that is also many of the countries that I visit. It's pretty typical for a woman my age to be married with 4 children or something like that. And when you arrive, people don't hesitate to let you know, and then they try to marry you as soon as you arrive as well. But say when I'm thinking I'm a bit lonely, I try to think about whether it's me feeling that because I'm not ticking certain boxes, or whether it's society's thoughts of like kind of the way I should be feeling, or if it's really me, whoever I am. Like, because loneliness is this kind of idea as well, isn't it? I mean, we can shift out of that. I feel most of the time, by the way, pretty grateful because I get to experience diversity. Like I said, the priority is diversity. Wow, I get to see lots of beautiful places rather than just have like one life. What you're asking, Bella, to be honest with you, my friends think I'm a big optimist, like a really big optimist. And I am. I see many situations with relatively rose-colored glasses. But I do feel really big sadness because I'm doing international relations at the moment at university, and a lot of it's just so heavy. And there's so much to think about for the future. And, you know, these are the conversations that I'm having with friends that also, are active global citizens.
It takes me to a quote that I came up of yours when I was doing some research for you, Jess, and it was that you said, "The world concurrently has me in bewilderment and raptures." And that was sort of linked to your international studies that you're studying there, and I guess your perspective of what the world's like, but also what you are seeing, what you are experiencing on the road through different countries. Diversity in different forms. It's not all the happy diversity, but also, I guess, being open to a different way of tolerance, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think what I would say to you is that I think the bravest people are the ones that I get to see who have really committed to a place, a cause, another person, their children. I think that's incredible to see, and that's happening all over the world. And I'm just like a little observer of these things, and I haven't really gotten into the meat of it yet. I'm sure life will throw me some pretty meaty things, but at the moment it's very much like this type of, like just observation, which is such a privilege to get to see like the world, right?
Yeah, and, you know, when you were talking earlier about you sort of wonder how people just don't travel more, it's easy to say when we talk about a country, about Australia perhaps, and easy, I take that with a grain of salt, everybody, because everyone's situation is different. But the fact of the matter is there are a lot of people in a lot of countries in the world that don't have the choice to travel. That's
right. And so when I say I can't believe everyone doesn't travel and just do these things, I mean the people who have the means and the time and the funds and things like that. And so a friend to me the other day said, we were on the Pamir highway, and one of the reasons that...
Can I just say that is such a random sentence? We were on the Pamir highway, and just the way that you say it as if it's totally normal.
Thank you. It's a good reminder.
The little insights.
Yeah, so Mary and I were talking about potentially having children, because in the next few years, like that's kind of where she's heading. And I was thinking that potentially I wouldn't, because I've seen so many women in the world who, like, that's the expectation of where they'll lead their lives, and it's almost written out in stone of that's the future for them. And I contemplate not doing it as a feminist and having that sort of power over choice and body and future and time as well. But then we had this conversation saying we don't want to live like that because it's almost fighting, you don't want to live your life in fight, but you'd rather live in acceptance. So
yeah, like you don't have to make a decision out of protest.
Yeah, that's right. I know that's where we're getting to with lots of decisions in the world though, right? Say you do not have kids, but then the reason that you've done it is because, like it's much more of a gentle reason. It doesn't need to be so much of a reactive sort of, I don't want the world to be this way, or, I'm fighting for all the women who deserve something else in this life.
I guess ultimately it's all everyone's decisions, and if you're free to make a decision, you're free to make the right decision for you. So that's all well and good as well. I want to get into moving towards something that really changed things up for you, and that was India and your experience with India. And in a way, it's sort of the way that it's happened is sort of connected to your bike as well. We mentioned that you've got a Viventi touring bike, and hello to Hells. Hi, Helen Dady, because you are another one of my guests who has one of these bikes. When I saw that, I thought of you straight away. Hells has just left Tunisia and she's back in Europe now, people. But the reason that I bring back those two together is they're a key part of you experiencing India as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I can kind of tell a bit of a story around this one. I was on the lookout for a new bike when I got back from Europe, and my dad is often really active in helping me out with my adventures. So he was doing lots of research because he's good at mechanics and things, and I'm just keen to use the bike as sort of a form of absolute opportunity. And we narrowed it down to one of the Surleys and a Vivente World Randonneur. And then Dad had a few hours of conversation on the phone with the owner of the Vivente World Randonneur bike, which is Noel.
Hi, Noel.
Hi, Noel. Dad had this great conversation with Noel, and then I got the Vivente. I didn't know much about Noel, but Dad had just said he's a really good guy. Like, for example, one of his bikes was on tour around Australia and got stolen out the front of one of the pubs in Central Australia. The guy who'd been riding, he called Noel and said what happened, and Noel helped him out greatly with getting a new bike really quickly and lots of support. So the first ride we decided to do was Tasmania, and we ended up taking 9 friends, lots of us on bikes, and we all wore like bright pink shirts and we had numbers on them. And so we went over on the Spirit of Tasmania as a big group. And then my dad said, you know, Noel, who runs Vivente, he lives over there. Give him a call. And so I did. And I said, hi, turns out we're coming to Tassie and we should be in your vicinity like tomorrow night. We're 9 people. Can we just like camp on the lawn and come say hi? And he got off the phone and said to his partner, I don't know if this is true, but I think we've got lots of people coming to camp on the lawn tomorrow night. And then we did it. So we turned up. The next day, he camped in his big orchard. He serviced every single one of our bikes. Not kidding, because he gets lots of joy from these particular things. And yeah, we made this really great connection. Yeah, we just, I guess, stayed in email contact, and I kept on cycling around with his Vivente. It was really, the nice connection was that I bought his bike, but it was much more than that. It was just this friendship. And so about a year later, I was just in New Zealand. And I got an email from Noel that invited me to go on a cycle touring in India. And Noel has had so much cycle touring experience, particularly in India. It's one of his favorite countries. The first being when he was 22 years old for 6 months around India.
Noel, I need to speak to you. I know you don't do podcasts, or apparently I've heard that, but I so would welcome a chat with you. Hey listeners, if you're loving the stories and adventures I'm bringing to you each week, consider supporting Seek Travel Ride by buying me a coffee. Your donation helps me keep the show going strong and bringing you even more inspiring content from our guests. Just head over to the Seek Travel Ride Buy Me a Coffee page. Every little bit helps and is deeply appreciated. Plus, it's a great way to show your love for Seek Travel Ride. I've included a link in the show notes. Thanks so much for being part of our community and for your support. Okay, now back to the show.
Yeah, well, I can tell you our little story, which has been quite interlinked for like the last 7 years, right? And so I got this email from him, which is a crazy email to get because I jumped around in my room like I was really excited and said yes immediately. And he only invited myself and one other friend who was the same age as him. So it was pretty classic. It was like me with 2 old guys in India. Anyway, I'd been cycling a lot by this point. I'd really taken off. Like I'd gotten the Vivente and ridden around like Central America and Southeast Asia and stuff. I was really like in my full swing cycle touring part of my 20s. But I always wanted to go to India, and I read blogs by women who had done it. I didn't really have anyone to go with as well. That was another aspect. Yeah. So I really just put India on the back burner. Like I really wanted to go. I'd traveled there in the past as a backpacker, but cycle touring just seemed crazy, and everyone talks about India as though it's like the busiest place in the world, chaotic, that you'd have no chance of making it a day through the streets kind of thing. And then when Noel invited me, it just felt I felt so safe. I felt like it would be absolutely fine. He'd done so much cycle touring there, and yeah, I said yes. And we cycled from Vizag, which is a big town on the east, on the coast, down to Bangalore for a month. And it was a really cool trip because when we got out of the airport, we put our bikes together and rode out at 3 a.m. and we cycled that whole route. It was very remote and tribal, like Jain people and animist. We saw lots of interesting things, sort of people really living life on the side of the road. Absolutely bewildered that we were there. Like every time we stopped for lunch, a photographer would turn up to write an article in the newspaper. And then that means that as you're cycling into the next village, people are calling out like, hello, Australians from the fields because they know you're coming.
Because they've heard about you, because they've read an article from the next village along. Oh, gosh, I love this.
I know, me too. It was amazing. And I just had the most insane experience of my life. It was incredible. And Noel really guided me on that and showed me how to find lodges in India, what to eat, what to be careful of. None of us got sick or anything like that. And then we even rolled into the airport at the end, wrapped our bikes up in coconut coir and bath mats and sent them back to Australia like that instead of a box. It was really a fantastic trip. And then the next year we went back again. I went back with Noel and my dad and 2 girlfriends. And that was just sort of a personal trip. But like I said, that was when I realized India's the place. There's this space. You don't see any cycle tourists there. And there might be parts of India where people are cycle touring on grasshoppers tours and Intrepid and things. But like we just sort of choose routes less traveled. I don't know how. We just go. There's so many roads. I mean, if you could cycle India for the rest of your life and ride a new road every day because they're always being built or they don't even exist on Maps Me, you're riding on blank space.
I haven't covered India as a destination much in the podcast, but I have touched on it briefly with other guests. And guests generally fall into 2 camps with India. There's ones where it's like it was hectic and full on. There's no sense of personal space. It was a sensory overload almost. And there's others who had an amazing time and would go there again and again. And it almost feels like it's people fall into those 2 polar camps when it comes with India. For sure. And strange things happen in India. I mean, it's a wild place. Totally safe. It kind of guides you through. It's kind of like this a flow on the road. So, for example, when you merge into the traffic, you don't look back at the traffic. You just merge in and the people behind you allow you to move in. And that's like all of India. All of India just kind of like pushes you through in its vortex. But sometimes people get a little bit thrown out because things happen and you just never expect it. I mean, sometimes really tough travelers, something might go down in India. Like, for example, we met some people in an Ayurvedic yoga retreat last year and they had been working on a workaway project in a macadamia orchard and the farmer hadn't used protective gloves for their experience and they got macadamia burns on their skin. Like, how obscure is that? So they were just unhappy and wanted to go home. Or in Jaipur, I met some English travelers that were going to spend 3 months there, but after a couple of days, they said, get me out of here. But I think that that's also a big part of the city. The city really just puts you into a precarious position in India that anything can happen. Whereas when you've got your bike, you've got a lot more independence and you can stay away from the cities and just go into that rural space where, I don't think people are out to make any money out of you or anything like that. It's a very authentic and amazing experience for both parties. You turn up with grass under your fingernails and they're like, wow, how did you even get here? And they're farming and using machinery that you haven't seen for 100 years. It's beautiful in Tamil Nadu or Karnataka. Now I've cycled through lots of South India, sort of Eastern and South and Western India, but it's a huge country as well. So it's hard to speak on behalf of what it's like to cycle all of India because I do see people's blogs of, riding through the vast spaces of the deserts and they're having a really challenging time. I understand that. But now I know Kerala as a cyclist and it's pretty much all of it is dreamy. You don't ever get onto a huge road. Obviously, that would be no fun at all. But if you stay on small roads, you have a brilliant time. It's so cool because even within a 5-kilometer distance or anywhere in India, in South India, you see so much. In Australia in 5 kilometers, you can just tune out like you do in the car. Whereas in India, for example, something I love to see is people balance a ladder on their shoulders whilst they're cycling and they're riding along in the traffic and they'll just indicate that they're about to turn right without even looking because otherwise they would sort of get decapitated. And they just turn right and the whole sea of India allows the person with the ladder riding the bike to move through. Just even the thought of a person riding a bike with a ladder.
I know. Can I tell you another of my favourite things I've ever seen?
Definitely.
So I was riding with Dad that time, a couple of years ago, probably in Karnataka. And we were on a middle-sized road, not very beautiful for us to be cycling on. And we see lots of people following sort of like a little group on the side of the road, and we see what's at the front, and it's 3 men naked. And so we stop. We're like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, yeah, they're really well-spoken, and all they're holding is a feather duster, each of them.
That is random.
I know, pretty random, right? One of them had been naked walking around India for 12 years, and the other 2 had been like sort of 6 years or something like that. And they walk like 3,500 kilometers a year sort of thing, and stop at temples each night, and they get alms. They get things given to them. And they are scholars. They're learning. They're just deepening their understanding of Hinduism and walking without any worldly possessions. And it's amazing.
Hang on, no. Something still confused me. What on earth was the feather duster for?
I don't know. I'm not sure. But when we were there, they didn't use it at all. They were just holding it in their hand. If someone knows, that would be great. They could let us know.
You know how sometimes you see tour guides and you'll see one in Vienna and they're holding like an umbrella in the air so people know where they are?
Yeah, maybe, because they did have lots of followers who obviously weren't ready to take off their clothes yet.
Something that you did say which struck me is like a day in India is the equivalent of like 2 weeks of travel.
At least.
You just experience so much.
And that's not just me saying that. I mean, now I've taken a couple of summers worth of trips where I guide people on a 2-week trip around Kerala and Tamil Nadu. And that's what I say to everyone. And they tell me after 3 days, it's surely already a whole trip that we've done. You see so much. You feel so much. And at the end of the day, after riding together with a group in India, you all saw different things. So you have a conversation about, did you see this? And they say, no, I didn't see that at all. But did you see just amazing sights?
You each have just unique stories to swap, don't you?
Yeah. And I thought about why it is that India is so special. And I think they're just a really open-hearted nation. And they just so happen to have really nice roads and laneways to cycle because, you know, we're cycling in Eastern Europe right now. And for sure, if you sat down and had a conversation with someone here or shared a meal, they're really, really lovely. But at that initial glance, you don't make the same connection with your eyes with someone. The sort of warm, big, open smile, it's not quite, you don't just like have that instant connection. And India provides that. And there's so many people that every moment you're just like connecting with someone, smiling at a schoolgirl on her way to school and old beggars even just beaming at you.
Eye contact constantly.
Yes. Yeah, it's really intense. And that really keeps you present during a day of cycling, right? Like you don't really switch off.
Do you know something that I think of when I think of India as well? I think of it when I think of a lot of countries. I think of food. I think of amazing Indian food.
For sure. It really does.
Tell me about some amazing food you had on a cycle tour in India, because every podcast episode just has to talk about food at some point.
Okay, that sounds good. I mean, what comes to mind is a traditional dosa that's served on a banana leaf, like the big pancake dosa. And they've just got vegetable curry inside, but you're watching them make the dosa and it's got crispy edges while it's made on that big hot plate. And you have it with a cup of chai. Of course, you have chai at every possible opportunity. But the people who make chai, they're such genius. They're literally artists. It's not just anyone can make chai. I mean, they make it look like a great deal as they pour the milk and mix it.
From a real height too, right?
Yeah. Some other parts of the world also get into that high arm pouring.
Yeah, and like aerating it stuff. It's funny, I think there's a place in Spain. Is it Galicia where they pour the cider from a real height?
It's up one from Galicia.
Basque Country?
Yeah, where San Sebastian is. They pour their cider such a high, yeah, and it's really hard to get it in the cup.
Yeah, but these chai makers are doing the same thing. I had a great close friend, a colleague back in Australia at work who was from Sri Lanka. Whenever she made chai, it was always about aerating. Like you just never made a cup of tea where you'd have like a tea bag or something and then you'd steep it and then you'd pour milk or whatever. Like it was a full transition from cup to cup to cup a few times and you'd get it given to you with bubbles and everything. And I'm picturing that's exactly what's happening in India as well.
Yeah, and it's funny because the end product is served in like a tiny little paper cup, but it's kind of a shot.
But I'm thinking of the dosas that you were talking about. I've had those, again, Sri Lankan, but I'm guessing Sri Lanka and that part of India as well probably share a little bit of the cuisine.
And similar because they have, Kerala means land of coconuts. So Sri Lanka is very similar in the amount of sort of tropical coconut cooking they do. But once you get to know the food in a place like Kerala, they really do have the same 3 curries, like egg curry, chickpea curry. It's really typical for breakfast with parota, like the flaky, hot, buttery pastry, which you really can't get enough of. Sometimes we carry jam in our bags and put jam on because we get sick of curry. It takes a while. And you can always have an omelette for breakfast. They do really good just tomato and Spanish onion omelettes. Delicious.
I always get hungry when we talk about it. I'm always hungry, though. It's not just because I'm talking about it here. I'm a foodie and I get to travel and learn about different food. Good Indian food is great as well. I don't want to go down the stereotypical path of there is a lot of people that would think about India as a place where you're going to get food poisoning.
Yeah. I mean, that's what the world is changing fast, like we've talked about in this hour. And wow, Kerala is quite developed these days in terms of you can eat meat and not get sick. And yeah, so far on my trips with my guests, we haven't had sickness. I just got sick one night after a fish curry myself, but otherwise we've been blessed. But you know the secrets. I mean, everyone just says eat where there's lots of people and it looks like they've got high turnover and it seems pretty good.
Can I ask, Jess, as someone who's travelled so much, do you enjoy returning to places you've been to? India, are you experiencing the same places every time you go back? Because I know you're organising tours there. Are you organising places new so the whole group and yourself are experiencing new places? Or is it no, you're taking people to the places that you've discovered and sharing that enthusiasm for those places with that group as well?
Thanks, Bella. It's a good question. Initially, I went there thinking that I would design tours in different parts of India so that I could see new parts of India myself. But the reality of the experience is that we made so many good connections. We've got local friends now. And I know Kerala, the system of roads in Tamil Nadu really well. And we've just made slight updates to the trips that we've run, just made them slightly more relevant or back roads inclusive. But no, it's actually really good to do the same trips because we know the place and it feels really comfortable for us because it is a huge thing to do, to take people cycle touring in India, I suppose. And then we get to do our own trips in between or after or something like that, exploring a new place. And possibly in the future, it might be nice to offer, say, a trip in Laos I'd be interested in doing, or Odisha in India would be cool. But right now, I don't need to reinvent the wheel at this moment. Because, for example, I'm enjoying the experience as well of seeing the same place in different moments in time. In 1 year, all the roads that we ride have changed because there's been floods and things like that. So some are in disrepair and others have been completely improved. And yeah, it's amazing to watch the change. And then there's also the same, you see the same people, you see the same waiters at the restaurants and you see the same people at the hotels that we stay at. I literally rode past this old man reading the newspaper on a laneway like 4 times. And every time he just looked up over a 1 year period, I saw him 4 times. And he would look up and just sort of nod. And I nodded at him. And that's like my little community, right? So yeah, I'm finding enjoyment in the familiarity that I didn't expect.
I'm going to ask you a tough question. It's not one that I've really asked people before. But if you had to sum up India in one word, what word would you choose to sum it up? How would you describe India?
Random. Can I give you an example of how random events occur?
Go for it. And in fact, actually, I'm going to see if you can give me an example wrapped up with another question, which I was going to ask you, which is to tell me about one day of your trip. I want you to give me a random example on one day of your trip in India.
Okay, sure. So after about a week of traveling through Kerala, we do a full day cycling through Tamil Nadu. And Tamil Nadu is much more old world. The farming practices are much more traditional. It's a poorer state. And you literally come down off the Western Ghats, which is a mountain range, runs down north to south. You come off the Western Ghats into Tamil Nadu, which is quite flat. And we go through this beautiful valley and immediately things change. Like there's bullocks pulling carts and they enjoy racing the bullocks actually. So you're often seeing like you're cycling along and there's bullocks charging toward you with someone whipping them and running at you. And so we were going through towns that have the bullocks and like women are just even brighter in their saris in this area. And often there'll be some event that's happening because there's so many rituals and events. There's 8 processes that people need to go through before they're actually considered an adult, including ear piercing ceremonies and just lots of things that involve everyone getting together and celebrating. So anyway, we were going through a small town and there's lots of people in the street dancing. And Marie, my colleague, and I pull up and we've got a couple of people, our guests behind us. And the people are standing, like lots of people standing on the street dancing, and there's drummers, and the drummers were dressed up in like face paint that was quite strange. And they had, like kind of circus clothes on. And they didn't just have drums, they had other instruments as well. And some people were sort of specifically just there for dancing, like all dressed up. And they said, come, and everyone pushes you in and you just follow the crowds and the energy to do whatever it is that, is happening in that moment. And Marie and I were really getting into the dancing because the drums were very loud and it's almost like you're inside them and they're going through the ground kind of. And we were dancing and everyone was on the street with us and our guests were getting into it too. And then at some point I looked over to my left that I hadn't seen before that. And there's like there's a dead body just laying there. And I realized quickly that we were actually at a funeral. We were at someone's funeral. And there were people right next to the body sort of mourning, actually crying, but we didn't really hear them crying because there was so much noise and dancing and drama. And I tapped Marie on the shoulder and said, look, we're at a funeral. And we kind of like moved out of the situation. Yeah, and it was wild. I mean, it's so much energy that crowds of people can create for different reasons. And like, it was amazing. And it turns out that if someone's over sort of 70 years old, they employ these professionals to help them send them off into the next place in a really powerful and positive way, right? Yeah, so we were dancing at a funeral, and that's just a random event of India.
A random event of India. Unexpected, which is possibly another reason why you could return to the same place year after year, and it's different. There's similarities, but there's differences. You might see the same man on the same road nodding up from reading his paper 4 times in the space of a year. Or there's also these random events that you couldn't plan for because they're totally random and unexpected. Just if people want to find out more about you and actually follow all your varied and random adventures along, what's the best way that they can do so?
I think Instagram is best because I just post lots of stories. I get really excited every day and, post whatever I'm doing in that moment. And so there's always updates. And I'm really into writing and sort of just post bits and pieces there. So it's probably the most easy public space of connection. Yeah, I would say.
Cool. And I will post links to your Instagram account in the show notes as well. As I come to wrap it up, I finish off with the same 3 questions. The first one's music related. You're now a guest of Seek Travel Ride, so you get to get added to the Seek Travel Ride music playlist, available now on Spotify, Apple Music, and also YouTube Music. What song, Jess, are you going to pick to be the soundtrack to your adventures?
Okay, so I just jumped into this question today with my my crew that I'm cycling with at the moment, and they immediately said Unstoppable by Sia.
So hang on, are you choosing that or is that what they've chosen for you and you're choosing something else?
I'm choosing something else, but that's what they sort of think. So that's from an outsider's perspective. And then I choose Bittersweet Symphony by The Verve.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that song.
Oh, I love that song too. And I thought about why. It just came to mind. I really resonate with it. And it's an incredible song to listen to when you're riding through mountains because it's so dramatic. But then on a deeper level, I think it's an existential challenge to sort of break the mold, as difficult as it can be. And I think that's what I'm really all about, right?
Definitely what you're about when I listen to you talk about your own story and your own experiences. It really is breaking from the norms, breaking away from army recruit life, officer training, to just the total polar opposite now.
And you could easily take the Bittersweet Symphony to be quite pessimistic. But I don't think that it needs to be like that. Life's all about perspective. And I think that you can really make the most of the current challenges of the world. And I hope we can. I hope we do.
Okay, final 2 questions. You know what these are. First one, you're given a choice one day. You can choose to ride your bike forever up a constant, never-ending hill climb. Caveat, there's no mountain views. So I'm just putting that out there. Or you can choose to cycle on a flat road, but into a constant headwind. Which one are you going to choose? So
at this point of my life, 100% just cycling up a hill. But I aspire to be someone who could just cycle against a headwind all day.
This may sound so cliche or something, but I feel as your tours in India evolve, you'll turn into that person.
Yeah. I mean, I think if someone was touring in India their whole life, then they wouldn't even speak at all or ride their bike. They'd just sit.
It would be random.
Yeah, true.
Okay, final question. This will be an interesting answer. you are given a choice one day. You can ride 4 hours, but you'll be 4 hours on your own or 4 hours with other people. Which one are you going to choose?
4 hours with other people.
What if it wasn't time restricted and it was ride your bike on your own or ride your bike with other people?
It's just that I feel so much more reflection and self-development through talking with other people. And that's really nice. And so, but you're right. It would be great if we could change the dynamics and have a couple of hours alone, a couple of hours with people, for sure. But I'd probably do like 1 hour alone and then 3 hours with people.
I love that you take so much learning from conversations with people, because often I interview guests who take long solo journeys and that's how they've learnt so much about themselves. But you seem to explore different topics of conversation and go through different choices and different perspectives with others, and that's how you're gaining your learnings instead.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're inspiring, Bella, in interviewing lots of different people. I'm sure that's like one of the big reasons that it's happening as well.
It's funny, I don't know whether I would say I'm learning about myself through that, but maybe, I guess there's learnings I'm taking from their stories.
Or maybe learning about other people's, lives.
I've learned a lot about the world, that's for sure. And the overwhelming perspective, and I'm sure you get this as well, is actually it was Ali Denham, hi Ali, from Cycling About, and he said it the best, is like, the world is safe and people are kind. They're the two learnings he's taken from his travels, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah.
Again, is something that comes up, that people want to help you, people are kind, strangers are welcoming. It's not the big scary place we're told it is. I'm not saying that there's not places which are potentially dangerous to be in at certain times, but you could say that of many Western cities as well.
Absolutely. And if I was going to write a book about experiences, it would just be about, I'd mostly be shouting out to women and letting them know that there's so many lovely opportunities in the world. All you have to do is sort of be open, start conversations. Amazing things happen when you're not afraid, don't let fear win. Like your friend said, yeah, I really agree. And if that's what your podcast can do is like for people, that's huge, massive.
It's certainly inspiring people to take journeys. And listeners, I love this. Each and every week I'm getting people get in touch with me to let me know that they've been listening to episodes and drawing inspiration to actually take off on two wheels and explore on their own adventures as well. And that is the best. That is something I often ask my guests, what's something unexpected that's happened? That's totally something that's unexpected that's happened from the podcast. And I'm here for it every single day of the week. I love it. Keep telling me your stories. On that note, Jess, it is time to wrap the show up. And I often get an inkling of what my guest will be like through conducting some background research and understanding about your adventures. And sometimes I get a different perspective and go, oh, I wasn't expecting that. And sometimes it confirms things for me. Speaking with you, it's definitely confirmed that you're someone who cycles with both eyes open to opportunities, to insights, to understanding more about the places you're going through, the people you're journeying with, and also drawing insights then about yourself as well. Something I came up when I was researching was a quote which says, "Life really is simpler and so full of opportunities when on a bike." You definitely come across as an adventurer who takes those opportunities with both hands, doesn't look back, goes forward, throws caution to the wind and says, yes, I'm going to make this happen. I am certainly looking forward to seeing what you're going to make happen with those opportunities to come. All is to say, Jess Thomas, it has been an absolute pleasure to swap time with you, hear your experiences and share your story here on the podcast for Seek Travel Ride. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bella. That was really fun.
Well, listeners, I don't know about you, but the general feel I got from speaking with Jess there and hearing about her stories and experiences was just a real enthusiastic energy. It's clear that she takes energy from this lifestyle, and what's really clear is that taking bike adventures really energizes her. And it's also pretty clear to me that she's probably someone that energizes the group of people that she's with as well. I really loved the insight that as she's molded this lifestyle for herself, she's consciously made the decision that her work tour guiding is done predominantly as a hiking tour guide, and that cycling is something that she keeps for herself. Although she is taking tours in India, and if it's something that interests you, I definitely encourage you to seek it out. Just the little snippets that she shared there about her experiences, totally random, as she says, but experiences you could find in no other place for sure. I thank Jess for her time, and I'm certainly looking forward to seeing where her adventures take her into the future as well. If you are enjoying Seek Travel Ride, do yourself a favour, sign up to our Seek Travel Ride newsletter. In it, I provide extra little information about our upcoming guests for the month, as well as news from our Seek Travel Ride community, whether that's from previous guests or listeners of the show. Something that I'm really proud of is the community that's sprung up around the podcast, and the newsletter provides a fantastic opportunity to share those insights with you all as well. To sign up to the newsletter is easy. I have provided a link in the show notes. Just click on that link and you'll be signed up to receiving Seek Travel Ride news directly to your inbox. Until the next episode, I'm Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.